Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Matt's voice came through the phone in a low, venomous hiss that made Nick's blood run cold even before he heard the words. The silence of the Newman ranch suddenly pressing in on him like a living thing. And then the message hit him with brutal clarity. Steal Victor's USB drive now. Not a suggestion, not a plea, but a command sharpened into a threat so precise it left no room for negotiation, because Matt didn't stop there. He never did. He always twisted the knife, and he twisted it deep. When he murmured Sharon's name first, letting it hang in the air like a prayer turned curse, followed by Noah's, spoken with deliberate slowness, as if savoring the way Nick's grip tightened around the phone, as if Matt could see the flash of images tearing through Nick's mind. Sharon laughing softly at crimson lights. Noah hunched over his laptop trying to pretend the world wasn't as dangerous as it was, and Matt exploited that vulnerability with cruel efficiency, reminding Nick in chilling detail that accidents happened every day in Genoa City, that brake lines failed, that dark streets swallowed people whole, that fires started from nothing more than a spark, and Nick knew in his bones that this wasn't empty intimidation, because Matt had already proven how far he was willing to go, how easily he could slip through the cracks of security and morality alike. And Nick's first instinct was fury, raw and explosive, a Newman reflex honed by years of war with enemies who underestimated him, but that fury collapsed under the weight of fear, real fear, the kind that hollowed out his chest and made it hard to breathe, because this wasn't about corporate sabotage or power plays anymore. This was about blood, about family, about the people Nick had already failed too many times to count, and the thought that his father, Victor Newman, the man who had built empires and destroyed them with equal ruthlessness, was now unknowingly holding the very weapon that could end Sharon and Noah's lives made Nick feel sick, because Victor's USB drive wasn't just a file, it was leverage, it was proof, it was secrets layered upon secrets, financial manipulations, offshore accounts, surveillance logs, information Victor kept precisely so he could control the board no matter how the pieces moved. And Matt wanted it not for money but for destruction, for power, for revenge that had been fermenting for years in the shadows. And Nick paced the room, jaw clenched as Matt continued to talk, outlining the timeline with sadistic calm, reminding Nick that Victor would be distracted by the upcoming meeting at Newman Enterprises, that security would be light, that the drive was usually kept in Victor's private safe behind the portrait of Nikki, a detail that made Nick's stomach twist because it meant Matt had been watching them for a long time. And Matt ended the call with a promise delivered softly, almost kindly, that if Nick hesitated, if he tried to warn Victor, if he tried to play hero, Sharon would be the first to suffer, Noah the second, and Nick would live with the consequences for the rest of his life. The line going dead with a finality that echoed like a gunshot, leaving Nick alone with the impossible choice clawing at his conscience, because stealing from Victor wasn't just betrayal, it was sacrilege in the Newman family, a line crossed only in war. And yet what kind of son would he be if he let innocent people die to protect his father's secrets, and what kind of father would he be if he risked Noah's life on principle? And as the minutes ticked by, Nick's thoughts fractured into memories and regrets, of Sharon trusting him when she shouldn't have, of Noah believing in him even when the world told him not to, of Victor teaching him that family was everything while proving again and again that power came first, and Nick realized with bitter clarity that this was the moment all those lessons collided, that Matt had engineered the perfect trap by forcing Nick to become the very thing Victor had always feared. A son who would turn against him. And as Nick grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, the weight of what he was about to do settled heavy in his chest, because he knew stealing the USB drive wouldn't end this, it would only escalate it, would pull Victor into a storm he didn't even see coming yet. And Nick could already imagine Victor's eyes narrowing when the truth came out, the rage, the disappointment, the cold calculation of retaliation, but none of that mattered now, not compared to the image of Sharon's smile or Noah's future. And so Nick drove through the dark streets of Genoa City with his mind racing and his heart pounding, rehearsing lies he would tell, exits he would need, consequences he would have to face, because tonight he wasn't just stealing data, he was stealing time, buying seconds, minutes, maybe days of safety for the people he loved. And as he approached Newman Enterprises, the building looming like a fortress of glass and steel against the night sky, Nick understood with terrifying certainty that once he took that USB drive, nothing, not his relationship with Victor, not the fragile peace in his family, not even his own sense of right and wrong, would ever be the same again, because Matt had forced his hand, and in doing so had lit a fuse that would burn through every secret, every alliance, and every lie Genoa City had been built on. Sharon felt it before she could put a name to it. A quiet, prickly sensation in her chest, like something was about to happen, even though she couldn't say what. She wiped down the counter at Crimson Lights, the cafe usually buzzing with life by now, but today it was eerily still. The espresso machine's hum felt louder, sharper, almost like the room itself was holding its breath. She tried to push the feeling away, telling herself it was just tiredness, another reminder of how long she'd been waiting for something to finally go wrong. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't go. It clung to her like a shadow, and just then her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat before she even looked at the screen, fear twisting in her stomach as she saw Nick's name. The message was short and it hurt more than it should have. Asterisk, I'll explain soon. Asterisk, please trust me. And that word trust landed like a bruise because Sharon had trusted Nick before, trusted him with her heart, with her sanity, with her future, and every time the fallout had been bad, really bad. Yet even now, even with all her instincts telling her to run, she found herself whispering his name under her breath like a shield. She didn't know that across town, Noah was already in trouble. The late-night walk he took to calm himself after staring too long at lines of code was being watched by someone who stayed just far enough back to stay hidden. Footsteps echoed out of time with his own. Phone screens lit up and went dark again as coordinates were sent, updates shared, and a quiet message confirmed that the target was alone, vulnerable. Noah felt it too, that strange prickling at the base of his neck, that sudden feeling that the night had gone too quiet. The laughter from a nearby bar stopped too suddenly. When he turned expecting to see nothing, he caught just a glimpse, a reflection in a dark window, a shape pulling back behind a parked car. His pulse spiked as his brain fought between logic and fear. He told himself he was being paranoid, but his hand tightened around his phone, thumb hovering over Nick's contact. No matter how messed up things were, his father was still the first person he wanted to call when the world felt off. And miles away, Victor Newman stood in his private office, staring at the open safe behind Nikki's portrait. The absence felt louder than any alarm ever could. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with a fury that had been sharpened by years of betrayal. The USB drive was gone, the one thing he never let out of his sight. And Victor didn't need security videos or forensic reports to know who had taken it. Only one person had the access, the knowledge, and the motive that smelled more of desperation than greed. As he closed the safe with calm, Victor felt something deeper than anger settle into his bones, disappointment. The kind that turned into resolve. Because this wasn't just about stealing, it was about war. And Victor wouldn't be caught off guard, not by enemies, and certainly not by his own son. Meanwhile, Sharon locked the cafe doors earlier than usual. The feeling of being watched grew stronger as the streetlights flickered outside. Every passing car slowed just a little too much. Her phone lit up again with a missed call from Noah. Panic ran through her veins as she called him back and got only voicemail. Her voice shook as she told him to call her right away. She didn't know that Noah was now walking faster, his breath shallow, the distance between him and his apartment suddenly endless. A hand brushed his arm as someone passed too close, too deliberately. When he turned, the man smiled, apologetic, forgettable, which somehow made it worse. Because Noah knew with terrifying clarity that whoever was following him didn't want to be remembered. And as Nick slipped the USB drive into his jacket pocket, unaware that Victor already knew, that Sharon's fear was turning into certainty, that Noah was only seconds away from being confronted, the lines between protector and betrayer, victim and accomplice, father and son began to blur beyond recognition. The stage was set for a reckoning that would tear through Genoa City with unstoppable force. Because Matt had been right about one thing. Once this started, there was no going back. Noah knew the second it happened that instinct had failed him, that the choice to cut through the alley instead of sticking to the main street had been the mistake everything else would orbit around, because the night shifted in a way he couldn't explain, the air going thick and still as his phone buzzed in his hand with Sharon's name lighting up the screen, relief surging so fast it almost made him dizzy, and that was when a hand closed around his wrist from behind, not frantic, not clumsy, but precise, practiced, fingers locking in with bruising certainty as another arm wrapped across his chest and yanked him backward so hard the breath tore out of his lungs in a sound that didn't even register as a scream. the phone flying from his grip and skidding across the pavement where Sharon's name disappeared into darkness, and Noah struggled on reflex, adrenaline detonating through his body as his heels struck pavement and his elbow drove back into solid resistance. But whoever had him barely flinched, leaning in close enough for Noah to smell cologne layered over cigarette smoke, a voice low and calm at his ear telling him to stop fighting unless he wanted his mother to hear him die over voicemail, the words freezing him in place with brutal efficiency, because that was the moment Noah understood this wasn't random, wasn't a mugging gone wrong, it was targeted, personal and planned, another figure stepping out of the shadows to block the alley entrance just as Noah twisted his head and caught a glimpse of familiar eyes. Not someone he knew but someone who knew him, the kind of look that said you were always going to end up here, and panic surged hot and sharp as Noah tried again, slamming his foot down hard enough to crack against bone, earning a sharp hiss but not release, only a tightening grip and a warning squeeze that made stars burst behind his eyes, the man behind him shifting his weight efficient, economical, while the second man retrieved Noah's phone, scrolling through it with idle curiosity before locking the screen and slipping it into his pocket like a souvenir, because they wanted silence, they wanted time, and Noah's mind raced through 1,000 fragmented thoughts. Nick, Sharon, the half-written message on his laptop, the feeling that something had been wrong all night, as duct tape appeared seemingly from nowhere, pressed quickly over his mouth before he could draw enough breath to scream, the sound dying in his throat as the world narrowed to harsh breathing and the scrape of shoes on concrete. His body forced forward, half-dragged, half-carried toward a dark SUV that idled without headlights at the mouth of the alley, its engine a low, patient growl, and Noah's heart slammed so hard he was sure it would give him away, that someone would hear it, that a door would open, a voice would shout, but Genoa City kept its secrets well, the street remaining cruelly indifferent as the back door of the vehicle opened and Noah was shoved inside, the impact knocking the air from his lungs again as the door slammed shut and darkness swallowed him whole, the engine revving as the vehicle pulled away, and in the sudden quiet Noah realized with terrifying clarity that this wasn't just about him, that he was leverage, a message written in fear and flesh, and wherever they were taking him it was only the beginning. Sharon knew something was wrong the instant Noah didn't answer, because silence had a texture she recognized too well, a weight that pressed against her ribs and made it hard to draw a full breath, and as she stood in the darkened living room with her phone clutched too tightly in her hand, listening to his voicemail click on again, her own voice sounded distant and unreal as she told him to call her back, please call me back, the words piling up on each other with a desperation she couldn't hide, and when she hung up and the house remained painfully quiet, the panic she'd been holding at bay finally broke through, sharp and consuming, her thoughts racing as she replayed every detail she could remember. Noah saying he'd just go for a short walk, the way he'd hesitated at the door like he wanted to say more, the unease she'd felt but dismissed because she was tired of living in fear, and now that fear roared to life, flooding her veins as she called Nick, pacing the room, heart hammering while the phone rang and rang, every unanswered second amplifying the dread clawing up her spine, because mothers knew these things, they felt them, and Sharon felt it now with brutal clarity, that hollow drop in her stomach that had nothing to do with imagination and everything to do with instinct, and when she grabbed her keys and rushed outside, the night air felt too cold, too open, the streetlights casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward her as she drove Noah's usual route again and again, scanning sidewalks and alleys, calling his name out loud like it might pull him back into existence, and when she finally saw his phone lying abandoned near the mouth of the alley, the screen dark and scuffed against the pavement, something inside her shattered completely, because Noah would never leave it behind, never. Not without a reason so terrible it made her knees weaken as she dropped to the ground and picked it up with shaking hands, her fingers smudging the glass as she unlocked it and saw her own missed call staring back at her like an accusation, proof that he'd been trying to reach her, that she'd been seconds too late, and Sharon's breath hitched into a sob she couldn't control as reality crashed down in merciless waves. Noah hadn't just gone missing, he'd been taken, and the guilt was immediate and crushing, every past mistake rising up to taunt her. Every time she'd thought this time will be different, every moment she believed she could keep her family safe in a town that thrived on secrets and violence, and as she forced herself to stand, wiping her face with trembling hands, fear hardened into something else entirely, something fierce and unyielding, because panic might paralyze her, but love would not, and as she called Nick again, her voice breaking when he finally answered, Sharon didn't ask questions or wait for explanations, she spoke the only truth that mattered. The words tearing out of her like a wound. Noah is gone. And in that instant, under the cold glare of the streetlight with Noah's phone clenched against her chest, Sharon vowed silently that whoever had taken her son would learn exactly how dangerous a mother with nothing left to lose could be.